we've been born into an unstable world. It is maybe a mistake to think that peace and quiet don't have to be fought for every single moment of every single day.
Even great leaders get stuck. Others thrive. I'm Mark Cook, New York Times bestselling author, president of Windfall Partners. We get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. Clients upgrade leaders' retreats and conferences with my 5-star keynotes and breakouts on leaders' bold encounters. Also, leaders get weekly consulting as they execute key steps. Plus, brief check-ins guarantee results, live or via Zoom. After turnarounds as chief executive and 9 global studies of 2 million award-winning leaders, I've coached 4,000 client wins at top brands with my approach in over 50 cities worldwide. My Bold Encounters is an advanced system for leading. First, powerful steps on a path forward. Second, problem-solving skills that beat obstacles fast. Leaders create revenue breakthroughs and clients see new profits. Now let's lead with Bold Encounters today. Baroness Nicholson of Winterbourne.
Definitely.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a great privilege.
You're here at this moment when we're recording this to support Kalina, a musical that's trying to help Ukraine, not trying, but actually helping Ukraine. And you're supporting a group of people that has sacrificed a final production to expedite it to help those people. It's very touching, very, very you. And your friends, not just Amar International, but your friends in Salt Lake City of Amar. Is that right?
I'm part of a gang of really rather wonderful people, some here in Utah, and some in London, some in Ukraine, some in Iraq, some in Romania. We're a huge, great gang of people who desire nothing more than the betterment of the lives of those whose livelihoods, families, and everything else have been smashed away by a real enemy. Most of us don't face real enemies. The people we're trying to help and are helping, which is wonderful, actually have faced and in some ways overcome a real enemy. They're still surviving, but my goodness me, they need every helping hand to get back to life they can. And they know that an awful lot of their family, their friends, their villagers, their workplace mates have been killed completely, tortured maybe to death, or unspeakable horrors. So we keep that in mind all the time. And we're friends in need.
Yeah. Well, it is a sad story, this musical, that gets us engaged with the lives of those people, something most of us here in the United States really don't know much about at all. When the Soviets, way back when, just after the 30s, starved the other countries of the Soviet Union and especially Ukraine, and millions of people died. And so it's almost serendipitous and perfectly timed now that they're facing another tyrant instead of Stalin, that we help them and try to help them escape.
We thought we had a stable world, and we were mistaken. We've been pitchforked right back into the sort of horrific violence, real hellhole activities that we thought Europe particularly and North America had set aside for good. We thought we had a stable pattern of global management of crises, and that's not the truth. Back again, we have the worst side of human nature displaying itself in full force. And at the same time, a little bit further away, we've been watching the Chinese demolish the Uyghurs. We've been watching Saddam Hussein and his like with destruction of livelihoods in the Middle East. And we've also seen in Europe, we've seen some pretty awful things as well. So we've been born into an unstable world. It is maybe a mistake to think that peace and quiet don't have to be fought for every single moment of every single day. They do. And we've forgotten that. We should have remembered it. We had the memories, we chose to set them aside.
Yeah. Yes. As I did research on you the last few days, it's apparent that you spend every waking minute doing what you just described. You're helping lead 35 plus organizations in different causes to save children in the world. It's really impressive. One of the things that I was most touched by is where the name of this particular organization comes from. Would you mind just telling us your version of Amar and where that comes from?
Well, I visited Iraq illicitly and, perhaps rather foolishly in 1991. I heard of what was happening. We did. I was in the European Parliament and I was in the British Parliament. And we heard, of course, we get all the data. So we heard that Saddam was draining the marshes and wiping out one of mankind's most ancient surviving peoples, and their records and everything, the Marsh Arabs they were known as. In fact, they were aqua farmers of acute skill who'd been in the same patch of land and water for at least 20,000 years and had kept all the records. That's where writing comes from. These were the first writers. They changed figures of birds into a little meaning of a word. So naturally, I was desperately upset when I heard this was all being wiped out by a tyrant who'd got himself in power through misuse of newly discovered oil funds. So I got myself out there with some difficulty, who wanted a spare British member of Parliament wriggling around not knowing the language, But I managed to do that and got into Iraq and found that it was even worse than we'd been told. Far, far, far worse. So I dedicated myself to hearing the stories and bringing them back so that my colleagues in the stable democratic societies would learn what was going on and with action do something, stop this happening. Along the way, I was introduced to a very pathetic little figure, a child with what I learned afterwards of 45% third-degree burns all down its front, in acute pain and really, really damaged. And the local people told me, we don't know what to do about him. Can you possibly take him to a London hospital? And of course, everybody's heard that, in London, in Washington, in Utah, you will be patched up, you will be saved in that sense. I had no idea if I could do anything, but I found a very, very lovely local medical man, himself just escaped after torture for several years in one of Saddam's most monstrous prisons called Al-Gharaib. And he very, very kindly, very bravely, having just escaped, took me round and we found the boy we've been told about. We found him the second time and we said we'd try to take him into a London hospital. What followed was a decade of operations for the poor child, but they patched him up, best possible plastic surgery, and of course, he was very, very, very difficult. All this pain, all this grief with a growing boy in a country he'd never met, didn't mean to be in, with no language, no nothing. He was too sick to go back to Iraq. And certainly, Iraq would have killed him off had he turned up within a second. So in the end, he ended up staying with myself and my husband. And we brought in the Iraqi culture into our kitchen, if you like it. And we had Iraqi teachers to teach him Iraqi and English. He came from a humble family, so his level of literacy was pretty well zero. But he's a bright spark, and he learned, and he enjoyed life, and he got on very well with our Devon village people. And the Devon village people were absolutely lovely, all farmers. So he settled with us, and steadily his health was repaired.
Yeah, it's really touching that there isn't just power that you've had that you've used to improve people's lives or write a check and send it or fund things, but that you at one at a time have proven to help people. It's really admirable.
Listen, I don't have any power. No backbencher in the House of Lords where I am now or in the House of Commons. No elected politician really has power. Outsiders may think we do, but it just ain't the case. So what you do is you have energy, And on top of the energy, you have a determination to do what you got yourself there for, which is help the rest of the world have a better life. So you just need a bit of energy, a bit of determination, and a knowledge of the difference between right and wrong. That's the key. That's the real key. It's values, ethics, which all of us learned at our mother's knee, and you just have to make the effort to use them in tense and difficult situations.
And so you have. And I think I have one question about the determination that you speak of. I was very touched also by things you've personally overcome, and I don't even know how to talk about them. So I'd like to ask you, if I may, your hearing and your sight are different than mine, but I don't know how you would describe that. I have read your comments that they were an engine of determination, and maybe some of what you have in determination stems from that. Would you mind telling me a little bit about that personal situation?
If you're brought up on a small family farm, you have loads of determination. You've got to catch the cow that's strayed, you've got to milk her, you've got to persuade her to calm down, you've still got to get the hens fed, and you've also got to do everything else, carry in the milk, you've got to help your mother skim the milk so she can make the butter. I recommend a small farm upbringing with few people to help. That's the key to everything. And you also become very healthy, you see, because you have the right food, and you help all the time. It's a family matter, farming. So I recommend farming for giving anybody determination. And you have to be determined. As the bull loose in the field, somebody's got to do something. Doesn't appear to be anybody else to do anything. So determination comes from a happy, farming, hard-working background.
You once told someone that one of the things you're most proud of was your participation in Save the Children and getting polio vaccines to so many people, and that also had a personal origin. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I was born in the Second World War. My father was a member of Parliament. Most of his friends round the corner were members of Parliament. Uncles and grandfathers and great-grandfathers, all members of Parliament, all serving the public. My mother worked hard on orphans and widows. She was deputy chair of Britain's biggest children's organisation as a volunteer. So that side of the family, always, we've done everything we can to help. And on the male side of the family, we've done the same while earning a living. So really it's how you're built, how you're brought up, and I suspect what's in your bloodstream. Parents, sisters, the village choir, how you're made is the people around you, I think. I was just acutely lucky.
I've had many of my own relatives pass, and I read decades ago about when your husband passed and how you responded so courageously to that. I hate to bring that up, but it's about getting stuck in life and having challenges and then overcoming them. I wonder if you'd share with us some of those personal feelings and how you overcame that, although I'm sure you never totally overcome that.
My late husband had one of those very advanced cancers. He was very strong, and they didn't discover it, and then they said he was dying anyway. But somehow the medical profession, despite all its best efforts, really messed him up. The result of that was that I realized that there were deficiencies in the system. We have something every other year or so called the Queen's Speech, and the Queen comes to Parliament to deliver it. And she opens Parliament with the state opening, and then she, for the first time, and she doesn't like doing it, I would understand, is she gives what is essentially a rather toned down political speech. She says what her government is planning to do in the next 18 months to 2 years. And in there, almost immediately my husband had died, I found they had a bit of a health bill. The Queen was saying, we're going to be looking at this, that and the other on health. My government will be looking at it, not her. She's non-political. And so I thought, that's my chance. I can't bring Michael back. He's been treated badly by the medical profession, despite a whole life of service everywhere all over the globe to people in difficulty. He was magnificent. at least I can stop the same thing happening to other people. So I spent the next 6 months, which is what it takes to get stuff through Parliament, in the Queen's speech philosophy. I followed the Queen's speech and I managed to change the system. So I had the satisfaction that others following Michael in that sense were not going to suffer from the same dreadful weakness that his illness had uncovered. The medical profession meant well, but they really got it 100% wrong. And I was initially, I trained as a computer programmer and a systems analyst. And so I'm interested in the way systems work. And this was a systems failure of large proportions, disgraceful behavior actually. Shouldn't have happened, shouldn't have been allowed to go on, should have been changed 100 years before, wasn't changed. Why? Because it made some people a lot of money. So at least I plugged that gap, and it's a cleaner system than it was before my husband died. I was glad about that. I managed to make some good out of what for me was an utterly devastating situation. He was a lovely guy, everybody adored him, and he died too young, basically. So huge amounts of grief everywhere, but at least I managed to pluck an ember from the burning and make something good out of disaster. And that is good. That's a nice thing to do. It doesn't really heal your hurt, but it means you've done something good out of something bad for people who come on, and that's the right thing to do.
Well, and it's fairly rare for many that grieve to do that. So, congratulations. One of the things that attracted me to talking to you is not only all of the great things you've done, but that you did start in programming and systems. The major part of this audience either sells or buys technology. So what do you think, from all of the lessons you've had in life, would you point back into that environment? I know it's very different every year, but what about systems and computer and trying to manage and create innovation in that realm could benefit from some lesson you've learned? What would you tell them?
Well, I, as it were, did well, created stuff that became static and classic forever. I made at least 3 inventions in the computer software industry, which went straight in and haven't moved and haven't budged. And the way I did things was not precisely like my colleagues, all of whom seemed to have quintuple mathematical degrees at the highest degree. You know, here was I, a musician. So what I did was really look at it like a musician, the very simplest route, the very clearest and simplest and cleanest way of getting the answer, of getting the thing set up. And that appears to have lasted. People loved it, it worked. And I think that's the key. Keep everything as simple and clean and pure, if you like it, as you possibly can. All other distractions, however much fun they may be intellectually, set them aside for another day just to amuse yourself. So my philosophy was clean and simple, and that worked. I went to Africa a little while ago, and I visited a country where I actually set up their whole system. And I didn't know what I was doing when I set it up, because it was all sorts of stuff I'd never dealt with, like government payments for this, that, and the other, and pension rights. I didn't know what a pension was, you know what I mean? So I took the same philosophy, and I did the very, very simplest system, which I knew would work. And none of these great extremes that I was being told were so important, for pensions or for insurance or for government payments or all the rest of it. I put up the whole government system. Believe it or not, 30 years later on, it was still working. Well, that's unheard of in the computer world, you know. All these systems collapse and the new one comes, rather like an iPhone. 3 minutes later, you've got to buy the next one. I said to them, goodness me, you haven't altered the system that I put in for you. And they were absolutely sweet. They were all now quite old. And they said, why should we alter it? It works. And I was so touched. It must be by far the oldest computer system for some very important, the whole of the government structure, looking after everything for the entire population. And goodness me, there it was, still trundling along, absolutely perfect. So my answer must be simplicity. And they loved it. They said, we understand it, you taught it to us, you put it in, and why should we change it? It's never failed. So my answer must be simplicity. And that would be the same answer if you asked me my favourite piece of music, which would be a Bach Prelude and Fugue. But although that sounds very complicated, it's immensely simple. Be a musician, everything works.
Well, yeah, and converging on that's hard work to get it so simple. So, but just a couple of quick questions, and I'll let you move on today. I want to go back to Amar, and when you went to, before that, I think you went to Afghanistan once, and you were there to champion women, and there's a story that you immediately were telling a guard that was fully armed a few things, and I wondered if that's a true story, if it rings a bell, and if you'd tell me your real version of that.
I think the important thing is not to tackle an armed man. I've done it several times. Huge mistake. You have no possible chance of winning, and so don't do it, is my only answer to that one. At the moment in Amar, we're trying really hard with support from our great friends here in Utah who are also Amar. We've got a whole batch of female judges in Afghanistan. We're desperately, anxiously raising money for to try to get them out. Why do we feel such an obligation? We're not Afghanistani, we're not judges, all the rest of it. Because we, the West, and that I say, the USA, the UK, and others, I'm sure, we brought in for the first ever time crimes against women, violence against women legislation. And then we set up and trained a whole load of highly intelligent Afghanistani young women to actually be the judiciary. Naturally, the Taliban are now out of prison, and they've been told to hunt down their jailers. So these poor young women who did what we suggested they should do, and did it superbly, have been overwhelmed by the sheer nastiness of a very, very violent and very unpleasant branch of one of the ancient faiths of the globe. So we're working very hard to try to get them out. Keep your fingers crossed, please, because this really matters. It's not cheap, that's the problem, because it's a long way away, Afghanistan. You've got to wriggle them out. You've got to get them on an airplane. You've got to get State Department to accept them. They're refugees, genuine refugees, but we put them in post. We gave them that training. We supported them. And in that sense, by mistake, we've hung them out to dry. So I'm really working hard to try to get them out. If anybody's listening, come and help. We need to raise the funds.
Yes. Well, we'll gather your information on a few of your top causes, and I'll put them at the end of this episode, and we'll be glad to help. I appreciate your time. You're so generous and kind to talk to me. I will thank you personally, and I'm sure anyone who listens and then researches you a little more, even just a brief glance at the internet, will reveal so many things you've done that I couldn't let my day today be the same as it was yesterday. It has to be better than it was yesterday. You've lifted me personally.
Come and join our gang in Ukraine. They're all volunteers, wonderful local people, Romanian, Ukrainians, fantastic volunteers. So come and have a go.
Thank you.
And lovely kids.
Welcome to Salt Lake City, and have a wonderful stay here.
Thank you for joining us to get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. You've heard a little bit about the power of bold encounters and leadership. Watch on. Go to full episodes with the iconic expert interviews at markspencercook.com/podcast. And please subscribe. My site takes you directly to YouTube video and podcast versions. Please make comments. Share this with your friends. Also, reach out to us to just brainstorm your priorities, challenges, events, or how bold encounters might help. Visit windfallpartners.com. Click the Let's Talk button without obligation and reach out. I look forward to speaking. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's lead with bold encounters today.